The wind howled across the frozen plain, rattling the thin walls of Elira Vance's small shelter. The night was bitter, colder than any she had ever known. Snow fell in thick, white sheets, hiding the world beyond her door. Every step outside would have been like walking into a living death. Elira sat by the small fire she had managed to keep alive, rubbing her hands together, hoping the warmth would last. She had nothing left to eat, nothing left to burn, and the cold had begun to bite through her thin clothes. Then she heard it. A faint scratching at the door, soft and desperate, like tiny claws scraping the wood. Her heart jumped. "Who's there?" she whispered, but the wind swallowed her voice. She paused, afraid to move. Snowstorms were cruel on this planet. Outsiders were almost always dangerous. But the scratching continued, insistent, fragile. Something alive was out there. Something small. Elira's curiosity overcame her fear. She grabbed a rag from the floor and cautiously opened the door. The storm hit her face like a hammer, freezing tears to her cheeks. And then she saw them, two tiny dragon hatchlings, their scales dull and cracked, their bodies trembling from cold. One was the color of dark smoke, the other like frozen fire. They looked at her with weak, frightened eyes, unable to move. Oh no, Elira gasped. She knew they would not survive long out here. She had heard stories of dragons, creatures of strength and fire, yet these two were just babies, helpless and small. She pulled them inside, holding them close to her chest. Their tiny bodies were ice cold against her skin. They shivered violently, their breathing shallow. Elira wrapped them in her only blanket, feeling her own warmth begin to drain into them. "They're so small, so cold," she murmured, rocking them gently. She had never seen creatures like this before. Their wings were delicate, their tails thin, and their eyes held a fear she had never known. Even in the middle of a storm, even in the dead of night, there was something fierce about them. They were not just weak, they were alive, and somehow they had found her. Elira searched her shelter for anything to help. Her fire was small, barely enough to warm herself, let alone two dragons. She tore bits of old cloth, soaked them in water to warm them, and wrapped them as tightly as she could. She whispered to them, telling them not to be afraid, even though she herself was terrified. Every moment outside in that storm could have been the last. Every sound could hide danger. But inside her tiny shelter, she became their guardian. Hours passed. The storm raged. Snow piled high against the walls, and the wind screamed through the cracks in the roof. Elira stayed awake, holding the hatchlings, singing quietly to them. She told them stories she had made up, of warmer days, of safe places, of friends who would never leave them. She did not know if they understood her words, but she knew they needed her to believe in their survival. By midnight, one of the hatchlings began to stir. Its wings fluttered weakly, and it nuzzled her hand with its tiny snout. Elira gasped in relief. The other hatchling slowly opened its eyes, looking around, trying to understand where it was. Both were still weak, still trembling, but they were alive. That small victory gave her hope, even as the storm outside threatened to destroy everything. Elira did not stop. She fed them what little she had, scraps of dried meat, drops of melted snow water, anything to keep them alive. She wrapped them tighter, pressed them to her body, and whispered, "Just a little longer. You'll be safe soon. I promise." She had no idea what would happen next, no idea if anyone would ever find them, no idea if the Empire of Dragons would come for their missing heirs. All she knew was that they were alive and she would not let them die. Time moved strangely in the storm. Minutes felt like hours. She dozed briefly, only to wake and find one hatchling crawling weakly toward her face, trying to find warmth. She held it gently, rocking it in her arms. It made a small, fragile sound, almost like a human baby's cry. Elira's heart ached. She had never felt so responsible, so afraid, so determined all at once. Outside, the storm continued without mercy. But inside, her small shelter became a haven. She built tiny walls of cloth around the hatchlings, tried to shield them from drafts, whispered encouragement and comfort. They began to grow slightly stronger, their shivering less violent, their breathing steadier. It was not much, but it was enough. It was hope. By the first hints of dawn, the storm started to fade. Snow still covered the ground, glittering like a frozen sea, but the wind had softened. Elira looked down at the hatchlings, now nestled against her chest, breathing steadily. She felt a strange bond forming. They were small, fragile, but alive because of her. And she understood, in a deep and quiet way, that this night had changed everything. The storm might have been the end for them, but it had not been. She had saved them. And far across the galaxy, in a throne room bathed in firelight and shadows, a dragon emperor stirred. News had arrived that two royal hatchlings were missing. The galaxy would soon take notice. But for now, in a small human shelter on a frozen world, a little girl held life in her hands and nothing, not even the Empire, could take that from her. Elira sat by the small fire, holding the two dragon hatchlings close. Their tiny bodies were still shaking, but slowly their warmth began to return. She could feel their hearts beating against her chest, fast and weak. They were not like any creature she had ever known. Their scales were hard in some places, soft in others, and their little wings twitched nervously. She had no idea how to care for them, but she could not leave them outside to freeze. That was certain death. "I'll keep you safe," she whispered, pressing them closer. "I won't let anything happen to you." The smaller hatchling, a silvery gray with streaks of blue, nuzzled her hand. The other, darker with hints of red, blinked slowly and stared at her with wide, uncertain eyes. Elira could see fear in them and she understood it. She had felt fear like that before, but now she had to be braver than she had ever been. She had to be strong for them. Her fire was small, just a few sticks and scraps of wood, but it gave some warmth. She wrapped the hatchlings in whatever cloth she could find, old blankets, pieces of her own clothes, anything to protect them from the bitter cold. She moved carefully, afraid of hurting them, but also afraid of letting them slip back into the icy grip outside. "They've never known warmth like this," she said softly. "But I'll give it to you. I promise." The hatchlings twitched and hissed softly, but there was no aggression. They were too weak, too scared. Elira gently stroked their tiny heads, trying to calm them. Slowly they began to relax. Their small bodies pressed closer to her, as if they already trusted her, even though they had never met a human before. Elira knew the storm could last for hours, maybe days. She had no way of knowing if anyone would come, no way of knowing if she could save them. But she did not think about that. She only thought about keeping them alive, one moment at a time. She melted a little snow in a small pot and gave them tiny sips of water. She tore small pieces of dried meat into tiny bites and fed them carefully, watching their reactions. The silver hatchling slowly began to move more, opening its eyes wider, testing its strength. The darker one tried to stretch its wings, though they were too small and weak to fly. Elira smiled faintly. They were responding. They were fighting to live. She felt a deep connection forming with them, one she did not fully understand. They were creatures of fire and scale, creatures the galaxy feared, yet here they were, small and helpless, depending entirely on her. Night turned slowly into morning. The storm outside had not stopped, but it had lessened. Snow no longer fell as heavily and the wind was quieter. Elira continued her careful work. She built small walls of cloth around the hatchlings to block drafts, rearranged the fire so it gave more heat, and spoke softly to them the entire time. "You'll be safe," she repeated. "I'm not going anywhere." She noticed something strange. The hatchlings, despite their fear, were beginning to respond to her warmth in ways she did not expect. The silver one nuzzled her cheek, curling its tiny body against her arm. The darker one leaned against her chest, resting its small head on her shoulder. Their trust grew with every careful movement she made. She realized that dragons, even powerful ones, could be gentle if someone cared for them. Someone like her. Hours passed. Elira felt exhausted, but she did not stop. She sang quietly to them, little songs she had made up, soft melodies that kept her own fear at bay as well. She whispered about warmer days, safe skies, and friends they would meet one day. The hatchling's small eyes closed as they listened, their breathing steadying. For the first time since she had found them, they seemed calm. As she worked, she thought about the galaxy beyond her frozen world. She had heard stories of dragon emperors, mighty rulers who demanded obedience, respect, and fear. She had heard about dragons raised in palaces, trained to fight, trained to command. These hatchlings were different. They had never been given warmth, never known kindness, and yet here they were, responding to her small gestures, choosing life over fear. "I don't know what the Empire will say if they find you," she said quietly, stroking the silver hatchling's back. "But right now you're safe with me." She arranged her shelter carefully, making small nests of cloth for each hatchling. She placed them near the fire, close enough to be warm but not too close to burn. She checked their tiny claws, their wings, their breathing. Every detail mattered. Their survival depended on her, and she felt the weight of it in her chest. She could not fail. As the night gave way to morning, Elira finally allowed herself a small rest. She held both hatchlings close, feeling their warmth begin to return fully. The silver one yawned and curled into her hand. The darker one snuggled against her shoulder, eyes half closed. They were safe for now. She did not know what would come next, but she knew that she had done something extraordinary. Two creatures of legend had survived a deadly night because of her small hands and her big heart. Outside, the storm slowly ended, leaving snow blanketing the world in silence. But inside the tiny shelter, life pulsed. The hatchlings had begun to recover, slowly growing stronger. Elira watched them, feeling a strange pride and wonder she had never known before. She understood that warmth was more than fire, it was care, attention, and love. And in that moment she realized that even in a galaxy of power and fear, even dragons could need the kindness of a human to survive. And so, in the small shelter on the frozen world, the night's terror had passed. Elira had kept the hatchlings alive, given them warmth, and earned their trust. She did not know if the Empire would come, if they would take the hatchlings back, or if the world beyond would ever notice her. But she did not care. For now she had done what mattered most, she had given life where there was almost none. And for the first time in her small frozen world, hope existed. Far across the galaxy, on the volcanic world of Kedros Prime, the Dragon Emperor Kedros the Ashbound rose from his throne. His palace was carved from black stone, lit by glowing molten rivers. News had arrived from scouts. 2 royal dragon hatchlings were missing. This was no small matter. The galaxy had rules, and the disappearance of heirs demanded swift action. His claws clenched. The law of dragons was strict. Any negligence or failure carried punishment. Missing? Kedros's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Impossible. They cannot vanish without trace. His advisors bowed, speaking quickly. We have scoured the nearby sectors. No ships, no life signs. It is as though they have disappeared into nothing, sire. Kedros's eyes, sharp as burning coals, narrowed. The Empire relied on order, control, and fear. The loss of these hatchlings was more than personal, it was a threat. A dragon heir was not just a child, it was the symbol of power, lineage, and law. To lose 2 at once was almost unthinkable. Yet somehow they were gone. Prepare the fleet, he said. Every planet, every system, every outpost. Scan for life signs. The hatchlings must be found, and the one responsible must be brought before me. His tail lashed across the marble floor, shaking dust and small debris. The weight of his fury pressed down on the advisors, and even the walls seemed to tremble. In the quiet of space, Imperial ships moved like predators. They passed through asteroid belts, skipped past moons, and scanned planets with sensors that could detect a heartbeat from 1,000 kilometers away. Every command echoed the Emperor's will: find the hatchlings. Nothing else mattered. Yet among the millions of scanned worlds, one small signal stood out. A tiny shelter on a frozen planet, barely powered, emitting life signs from 2 dragons, and 1 human. Here, said a young scout pointing at the display. They are alive, and the life signals are coming from a human settlement. Minimal energy readings, but they are there. The Emperor's eyes narrowed further. A human? He whispered, almost in disbelief. Dragons had never trusted humans, never cared for them, and certainly never expected them to interfere in Imperial matters. Humans were fragile, weak, and unpredictable. But here, somehow, a human was keeping the hatchlings alive. The very thought was unusual. Deploy the retrieval squad, Kedros commanded. Do not harm the hatchlings. They are still ours and they must return to their rightful place. The human, we shall see what role they play in this. Perhaps they are worthy of observation. Meanwhile, on the frozen world, Elira remained unaware of the Empire's awakening. The hatchlings were stronger now, though still small and vulnerable. Cirith, the darker one, had begun to test the strength in its wings, while Valen, the silvery one, nuzzled closer to Elira for warmth. She fed them scraps of dried meat, gently coaxing them to eat, and watched their tiny claws flex and relax. They're going to make it, she said softly, pressing a cloth over their wings to keep them warm. I think they'll be okay. But her instinct told her that something was approaching. The air outside felt heavier, charged with an energy she could not explain. The ground vibrated faintly beneath her feet. She peered through the small cracks of her shelter and saw tiny glimmers in the distance, lights moving with precision, not like any natural fire or star reflection. They're coming, she whispered, her voice trembling. She held the hatchlings closer, trying to calm them, and herself. She did not know who was coming, whether it was friend or foe. All she knew was that she had to protect them. Back in space, the Emperor's fleet moved with terrifying precision. Ships in perfect formation, scanning the planet's surface with instruments far beyond human technology. They detected the warmth of the hatchlings and the human. Kedros observed from his command deck, his eyes never leaving the screen. He had expected nothing, yet here it was, 2 heirs alive, cradled by a human on a frozen, barren world. Curious, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. This human, they survive where most would fail. Perhaps there is something different in their kind. Something worth noting. The retrieval squad descended carefully, cloaked in stealth shields, moving closer to the shelter. They had orders not to harm but to take control if necessary. The humans below were tiny, fragile, and the dragons were small but potent. The squad had never seen anything like it. They approached slowly, scanning for danger. Every step was measured, every move deliberate. Inside the shelter, Elira felt the vibration again. The hatchlings stiffened. Their eyes widened, alert and aware. She could sense the tension in the air, though she did not understand its source. Her instincts screamed at her that danger was near. She hugged them closer, whispering comfort. Stay calm, stay calm. I won't let anything happen to you. Outside, the fleet scanners registered her shelter as a tiny island of life amid a frozen desert. The Emperor's presence was felt even before they landed. Kedros's aura of command radiated through the fleet, and even the distant scouts felt the weight of it. Yet the small human and her dragons had survived, against the storm, against the cold, against the galaxy's expectations. Kedros leaned forward, claws resting on the edge of his command chair. Prepare for retrieval, he said. And observe the human. They may teach us something unexpected. Back on the planet, the first of the Imperial landing crafts touched down silently. Elira's eyes widened at the unfamiliar shapes moving toward her shelter. She did not know if they meant to harm her or the hatchlings. But she held them tighter, knowing she could not let them go. She whispered words of courage, more to herself than to them. The storm had ended. The snow was quiet. The world felt still. But beyond the horizon, the Empire had arrived, ready to reclaim what was theirs, and to witness the impossible. A human who had kept dragons alive when the galaxy had expected them to perish. Elira pressed herself against the wall of her small shelter, holding the 2 hatchlings tightly. The strange, humming vibrations of the landing crafts outside made the walls shiver. She could hear heavy boots crunching in the snow. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the dragons would hear it. She did not know what these creatures were or why they had come. All she knew was that they were very big, very strong, and she was very small. Cirith, the darker hatchling, raised its tiny head and hissed softly. Valen, the silver one, curled closer to Elira, shivering but quiet. It's okay, she whispered. I'm here. I won't let them hurt you. The door of the shelter opened slowly. A tall figure stepped inside, armored in metal that gleamed even in the weak light. The figure's voice was deep, echoing in the small room. Step aside, human. These dragons belong to the Empire. Elira shook her head. No, they're not yours. They need me. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. She pressed the hatchlings closer, feeling their tiny hearts racing against her chest. The armored figure hesitated. Something in her stance, in her fear mixed with courage, made the soldier pause. The hatchlings stirred, sensing the tension. Cirith's wings twitched, Valen's tail flicked. The human's protectiveness was unlike anything the dragons had experienced. Before the soldier could speak again, a shadow filled the doorway. The Emperor had arrived. Kedros stepped into the small shelter, his presence larger than any building on the planet. Heat radiated from him, though it was not from fire, it was power. His eyes glowed like molten gold, scanning Elira and the hatchlings with an intensity that made her knees weaken. You are the human who has kept my heirs alive, the Emperor said, his voice calm but commanding. It filled the room, yet there was no anger. Just recognition. Elira swallowed hard, afraid to speak. She nodded slightly, still holding the hatchlings close. Kedros's gaze fell on Cirith and Valen. The hatchlings, sensing their father's presence, stiffened. Their instincts screamed to obey, to go to him, to kneel before the throne that had always been theirs. But they did not move. They stayed with Elira. Their eyes, bright and alive, looked at her. And for the first time she understood. The hatchlings had chosen her. You, the Emperor said, his voice softer, almost curious. They are not afraid of you. They trust you. Elira felt her chest tighten. She did not know what to say. She only knew she had cared for them, warmed them, fed them, and whispered to them in the coldest night of their lives. And now, here was the most powerful dragon in the galaxy, watching them choose her over the throne. Cirith stretched its tiny wings slightly as if testing the air. Valen nudged closer to Elira's hand. Neither moved toward the Emperor. Kedros knelt slowly, lowering his massive frame so he was closer to their level. He extended a claw, not to grab but to observe. You have kept them alive when all others would have failed, he said. The galaxy would have expected their death. But you have done the impossible. Elira's eyes widened. I didn't mean to do anything except help them. I didn't think anyone would come. I just wanted them to live. The Emperor studied her for a long moment. The hatchlings shifted slightly, not afraid of him but not leaving her side either. Their choice was clear. Kedros exhaled slowly, a low rumble that sounded like distant thunder. Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated humans, he said quietly. The armored soldier who had entered first lowered his weapon, unsure what to do. Kedros's calm presence changed everything. This human, so small, had saved 2 heirs without weapons, without armies, without fearlessness of battle. Simply through care, patience, and courage. It was not strength as the Empire measured it. It was something else. Elira still held the hatchlings close. They belong with me, for now, she said softly. They're safe here. Please, don't take them away. Kedros studied her again. Then slowly he rose. His eyes remained on the hatchlings, then on Elira. Very well, he said. They may stay. You will not be harmed. Your shelter is blessed by the Empire. From this day forward, it is protected ground. Elira blinked in disbelief. She had expected anger, punishment, fear. Instead, the Emperor had given her permission to protect the hatchlings she had saved. Cirith let out a small, pleased hiss, curling closer to her. Valen leaned into her hand. The bond between them had held, even against the power of an empire. Outside, the snow glinted in the morning sun. The storm was gone. The landing crafts were still, and the fleet watched silently from above. Kedros returned to his own ship, leaving the human and her wards safe. The galaxy had expected fear and destruction, but instead, it witnessed a different kind of power. Care, kindness, and the courage of someone very small. Elira finally exhaled, relief flooding through her. The hatchlings stirred, nuzzling her and testing their strength. Cirith flapped its tiny wings once, almost playfully. Valen's silver scales shimmered in the morning light. They were alive, safe, and for the first time free to choose. She looked out across the snow, thinking of the night that had brought them together, of the storm that could have ended everything, and of the impossible moment when an emperor knelt before her small shelter and allowed her to protect the heirs. It was more than survival. It was a new beginning. For the first time, Elira understood that even the galaxy's greatest power could not command everything. Sometimes even dragons would bow, not out of fear but out of respect for a human who had simply done what she could to keep life alive. And in that quiet morning, with snow sparkling around the shelter and the hatchlings safe in her arms, she felt hope grow, a hope that the world and even the galaxy could change in ways no one had expected. Elira sat by the small fire in her shelter, the 2 hatchlings nestled against her. Cirith, the darker one, twitched its wings occasionally, testing the warmth of the room. Valen, silver and delicate, nuzzled her hand, blinking slowly with trust. Outside, the snow glimmered like crystal in the early morning sun. The storm had passed, but the world felt different now. It was quieter, yet alive with possibilities. For days Elira cared for the hatchlings. She fed them tiny pieces of dried meat, gave them melted snow water, and whispered to them stories of warmer skies and endless fields. Each day they grew stronger. Cirith could flap its wings a little more, and Valen's scales began to shine in the weak sunlight. They explored the shelter cautiously, but always returned to Elira when they felt unsure. She realized that they had not only survived the storm, but they had begun to trust her completely. The Emperor's blessing still weighed on her mind. She did not know why he had spared her, why he had allowed the hatchlings to stay, or what the galaxy would think of her actions. Yet she felt a quiet pride. She had done what no one expected, what the galaxy might have believed impossible. She had saved lives through care, patience, and courage. She had shown that strength was not only fire or claws or fleets of ships. It could be small hands, gentle words, and determination. News of the Emperor's decision spread slowly across the stars. Dragons in the Empire whispered about the human who had sheltered royal heirs. Some laughed at the idea, some frowned, but many were curious. The story reached other species, other worlds. A human girl had changed the expectations of a powerful empire, simply by being brave and kind. Her name, though small in the galaxy's vastness, became a symbol of something new. Elira understood none of this. She only knew that she loved the hatchlings and that they needed her. Cirith curled up on her lap, tail flicking lazily, while Valen climbed onto her shoulder. She smiled, brushing her hair gently over their scales. She had learned much from them as well. They were fierce yet fragile, powerful yet small. and they had shown her that life could be preserved with nothing more than heart and courage. One morning, the hatchlings ventured further than before. Cirith tried to flap high enough to touch the ceiling of the shelter, failing but laughing in its own dragon way. Valen followed, stepping carefully across the floor, testing its balance. Alira watched, amused and amazed. They were learning, growing, becoming creatures of strength and freedom, yet they remained loyal to her. The bond they shared could not be commanded by emperors or armies. It was earned, built through nights of warmth, patience and care. The emperor had returned to his empire, observing from afar. He watched the human and her dragons, noting how she managed their growth, how she fed them, how she guided them without force. He realized that she had taught them something the empire had never managed: trust and choice. Even the most powerful dragons in the galaxy had been trained to obey, to fear, to conquer. But these hatchlings had chosen differently. They had chosen life and kindness over instinct, over law, over fear. The story of the small shelter reached distant worlds. Humans and other species alike heard of Alira and her dragons. Some questioned why the empire allowed her to keep them. Others admired her bravery. But everyone who learned the story felt the same thing: respect for courage that did not rely on strength, power, or dominance. It was simple, human courage, and it was enough to influence the stars themselves. Alira did not care about fame or recognition. She only knew the warmth of the hatchlings, the rhythm of their hearts, and the quiet peace of her small home. Nights passed with laughter, soft chirps, and the tiny flaps of wings. Days were spent exploring, playing, and learning together. The dragons grew, but they never left her side. Even as the empire watched from afar, they remained loyal to the human who had given them life when the galaxy had expected their end. One evening, the sun set behind the snowy hills, painting the sky with colors Alira had never seen before. She watched Cirith and Valen chase each other around the shelter, testing their strength, learning to fly in small bursts. She realized that life was precious, not because it was powerful but because it could be fragile. And sometimes, it was the smallest creatures, the humans with their soft hands and warm hearts, who could protect it best. The Emperor's fleet continued to observe, but there were no orders to interfere. Kedros understood that he had witnessed something rare. The galaxy had seen the limits of fear, the bounds of control, and the surprising force of kindness. One small human had changed the fate of his heirs and reminded the stars that power was not only fire and scale, it was care, bravery, and the courage to act when no one else would. Years passed. Alira and the hatchlings grew together. The Empire learned to respect the humans who could survive in harsh worlds, who could save life without weapons or armies. Other species began to rethink what strength truly meant. And all of this started from one small shelter on a frozen world, where a little human girl had chosen to care, where she had given warmth to dragons who had never known it, and where she had shown the galaxy that hope and courage could come from the most unexpected places. Alira looked out across the snowy plains, the hatchlings perched nearby, wings flicking in the light breeze. She knew the galaxy was still vast, still dangerous, still unpredictable. But in her small home she had learned a truth the stars would not forget. Kindness, courage and care were powers greater than fear, and even the smallest beings could change the course of empires. Cirith curled against her lap, Valen leaned against her shoulder and she whispered softly, "We did it. We're safe. We survived." The wind outside carried no threats, only a quiet, shimmering light across the snow. The galaxy had learned something too. It had learned that even a small human could protect the future, teach lessons to the strongest, and leave a mark that stretched across stars and worlds. And in the warmth of her tiny home, with the hatchlings safe and alive, Alira smiled, knowing that what had started as a night of fear had become a story of hope. The galaxy would remember, in ways subtle and quiet, the night when a little human girl saved 2 dragon heirs and changed what it meant to be strong.